technology.
I'd like to also apply these ideas to the production of food, because obviously with a growing population, a rapidly growing population, these issues really hit home. You know, these are life and death matters when it comes to the global industrial production of food, or not industrial production of food. You make the point in your essay that there's been incredible rises in efficiency in the production of food over the last 50 years, in particular the Green Revolution, etc. But these are very much based on fossil fuel and phosphate developments. Do you see this, can we continue with the trajectory that we've been on?
Yeah, I mean, the global population has been growing extremely rapidly. To give you a sense of how rapidly, the chronology is really extraordinary. You know, it took 10,000 years to get 1 billion people on the planet, from the birth of civilization to around 1800. The second billion then took just 124 years. The third billion took 33 years. The fourth billion took 14 years. The fifth billion took 13 years. And we're now adding 1 billion people to the planet every 12 years. So the rate of population growth is truly extraordinary. And we've recently clicked over 7 billion, and by 2050, we're going to 9.5 billion. So another 30% on top of where we are now. That's like adding 2 Indias to the global population. And at the same time, as we have to add 30%, as we will add 30% of people to the global population, all of the existing people are consuming more. So as the developing countries rightly develop, they're consuming more food, and also higher quality food, which requires more resources in and of itself, particularly meat and dairy. So, experts in this area estimate that we'll have to double the world's food production by 2050 to accommodate that increase in population and the increase in appetites from poor people around the world. So that is an extraordinary global environmental and economic challenge. And I think we need huge changes in our system of agriculture in order to accommodate that.
The things that have made food production so efficient over the past few years have been things like phosphates, but that's not a renewable resource. So in some people are arguing that we're actually running out of phosphates. To reference our previous discussion, I'm sure it's a point of conjecture as well, but arguably without phosphates there's no way that we could cater for this kind of rising population.
Yeah, I think we've clearly had a number of tailwinds, including fossil fuels and a range of different fertilizer options, and those are going to change. We need to use less fossil fuels across the board, including in agriculture. But again, we faced these kind of challenges before. In the essay, I talk about a period a century ago when agriculture benefited enormously from a particular kind of fertilizer that came from South America called guano. And it led to a huge boon in European agriculture as this guano was mined and brought to Europe to fertilize European fields. And then it ran out. And there was nearly a crisis in Europe as they ran out of this extraordinary fertilizer. But they discovered an alternative kind of fertilizer. The Haber process enabled them to access nitrogen from the air and create an alternative source of fertilizer. And so technological progress took over as a resource was exhausted. Now, you can't guarantee that's always going to happen, and we do need to be very mindful of limited resources, there's no question about that. But technological progress is an avenue that we can continue to seek to make gains in, and that will be enormously helpful.
I heard an Indian environmentalist, in fact the 2 Indian environmentalists I've heard speaking publicly both said to be an environmentalist in India, the most important thing is actually the education of women, because the education of women is what reduces fertility rates, etc. It seems to me that without reducing global population growth, that at some point you'll have to bump up to the limits of resources, but even water, I think,
Yeah.
is a is a finite resource.
Yeah.
I just wanted to bring it back to the climate change issue. Again, we come up with this very difficult conundrum of reducing emissions while we have a growing population, resources use. Geoengineering seems to me the great elephant in the room. It doesn't really seem to have been discussed so much publicly. Do you think this is something that will come to the fore more?
Yes, I do. Geoengineering is, people talk about it as a backup plan for climate change, a mechanism to alter the Earth's climate to try and offset some of the impacts of global warming, and there are a number of different proposals for how you might do that. I think a lot of people, for understandable reasons, are concerned about geoengineering. The research is currently quite weak. The risks are extremely high, and I think people are genuinely worried that geoengineering might be thought of as an excuse not to make progress on reducing emissions, and those are all legitimate concerns. But unfortunately, I think that the situation that we're in now with climate change is such that it is extremely grave and extremely unpredictable. We could end up, we may or we may not, but there is a possibility that we could end up with very serious non-linearities in our climate change impacts, where we suddenly have to deal with a very rapid warming, which is extremely challenging to adapt to. And if we end up in that world, in a slightly unpredictable world, if something happens that we don't expect, then we will need to look at geoengineering solutions. So I hope that we make progress on that as a backstop technology, and I hope that we don't use that, however, as an excuse not to take action on emissions reduction. But I think we need to do both.
It's been great to talk to you. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Nick.